Hello and welcome to a Community Futures Entre-Corp HR workshop put on in collaboration with our friends over at Alberta Labour and Immigration and our Workforce Development Officer. Community Futures also receives funding from the Government of Canada, and we would like to acknowledge those two funders in helping us bring this important skill set to you. So a couple years ago, the Brood Survey identified in our region that we needed to help our businesses build HR capacity. As many of us, I know I owned a small business and it wasn't in the budget to have an HR person on staff or to bring in a consultant CPHR. So we're really happy to bring you these facilitators from across the province and locally and help you build up your HR capacity and skills within your business. We hope that this makes your workplace safer, healthier, happier, and more productive. We're going through extraordinary change right now, and you're going to enjoy hearing from facilitators to help you understand and work with everything from gig workers to mental health, resiliency, finding purpose, hazard assessments, and a number of other things. So thank you so much for joining us. It's our pleasure to have you on board. Please share them with your friends, watch them at any time you need. And thank you again to our funding partners and the facilitators who have done such a great job on these. Take care.
Habits or return to old mindsets. What we do know, though, that is to thrive, resilience has to become the new normal. We need our leaders to be accountable for implementing resilience throughout the organization. I think a lot of us have been exposed to the concepts of resilience, but this information needs to spread throughout organizations in order to build a culture of resilience and build safe work and secure work communities as well. Now, come on, we know the workplace is often strained, stressful, and overwhelming. Employees have been taught to check their feelings at the door, to focus in on their work, to place their lives in different compartments, so they had their personal and their professional selves. Now, with what's going on and with a lot of us working from home, or maybe even having partners working from home, that is simply an impossibility. Employees cannot leave their emotions and personalities at home because they are at home. By building work communities that are safe and secure, yet also encouraging and stimulating, management professionals can also create teams that are more productive, satisfying, and high-performing.
And anyone following along on the slide deck, we're on slide 5. Resilience and respect in the workplace have more in common than just their first 3 starting letters. Resilience in the workplace cannot be fostered without a solid foundation of respect for one another. I feel we all have our own definitions of what respect is, but for our purposes today, respect is defined as a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, achievements, or qualities. So, how does respect show up in the workplace? As you can see on the slide, there is inclusivity. But do we really know what that means? Being an active listener, demonstrating you care, bringing your A game to work, being accountable, and taking responsibility. In the current work environment, it's more important than ever that your first impression will last. Being professional, inside and out, has an impact on respect in the workplace. Pre-pandemic, most of our organizations had things like a dress code, employee guidelines of conduct, professional standards, and such to support this. But now, given the current work from home situation, sometimes people are showing up in their pajamas. So I think it's safe to say we have reimagined the standard dress code, and it will be interesting to see if any of these translate or stick when we eventually return to the office. And it's important to remember, folks, especially when we can't see one another face to face, that our demeanor, our body language, and our tone of voice all contribute to creating a respectful workplace. And as we all know, the way we look and carry ourselves creates an impression on the people we work with. A multi-generational workforce. So here's an interesting take on building respect. A multi-generational workforce, of which we are all a part of, and we're hearing more about every day. At least we were before COVID-19 hit. So how do you think multi-generational workforce plays into building a respectful and resilient workplace? It's important to understand the different characteristics of each generation. And typically right now, it's the population between the Gen X, or 39 to 54-year-olds, and the Gen Y, the 25 to 38-year-olds, that make up the bulk of our work environments currently. So let's look at some of the differences. Gen X, as you can see, prefer independence versus supervision. And they're the ones that introduce the work-life balance scene. This group is typically mid-career and they're well-established. If we contrast that with Gen Y, they can be seen that they're more likely to jump employers until they find just the right one, valuing things like culture, paid time off, and are generally motivated by knowledge and training. These are what we call our millennials. Also referred to as the generation disrupted, they are as ambitious as the older generations, but despite their desire to make a difference, is evident in their concerns about the professional and personal lives. Then there's Gen Z. So that's our 22 and under. So some in the workplace, a lot of them are still in school. And here's an interesting tidbit we recently came across. 25% of Gen Zers who are in school right now are going to be working in jobs that haven't been invented or even created yet. And that is and this generation by the end of the year, so a couple more weeks, are going to make up 25% of our workforce globally. So they are definitely a generation on the move. And in our current context and working from home, some of our generational differences can even be more obvious. I find myself personally reaching out to our tech-savvy millennials in our office more to help me with what I feel like are my endless IT questions and issues. And when Dean and I are collaborating, we tend to use video conferencing through WebEx, or we phone one another. Whereas our younger analyst team has actually led sessions to our office on how to file share and screen share through Jabber, which is our inter-office online chat system. Totally blew my mind to even know we could do things like that. So what are your thoughts on creating respect in the workplace, in the work from home environment? If you've got any thoughts, please put those into the chat area for us. Thinking about how you can create respect in the workplace in the current work from home environment. Some things we consider are, we can start meetings with a quick hello or a quick catch up. Have understanding and empathy that many of us are pulled in many directions with distractions with partners, pets, kids all at home. Trying to offer support to your colleagues when someone is struggling or missing a deadline. So those are just a few things that we can try and do among many others to create respect in our online work from home. So what is the impact of a resilient workplace? High-performing organizations understand the benefits of building a culture that promotes the well-being and engagement of their workforce. Engaged and thriving employees are more likely to be agile, adaptable to change, and more resilient. Have fewer health problems and lower healthcare costs. Tend to stay with their employer and be loyal. Resilient employees tend to volunteer their time in their workplace and their community. They tend to recover quicker from absences due to illnesses or injury. They tend to report excellent performance, and they tend to participate in workplace wellness issues. Now, we have the opportunity to simultaneously address safe, secure, and supportive engagement to build a culture that supports the behaviors leading to a healthy and resilient workforce. Thriving employees reduce your human capital risk because they often cost less in their annual benefits spend, they perform and produce at higher levels, and they spark an organization's competitiveness and success. According to Gallup, when employees are not thriving in their lives, they are more vulnerable to burnout and stress and actually add risk to our organization. On the flip side, when employees or managers are thriving, the outcomes are tremendous. They miss fewer days from work from health issues. They have lower disease burdens such as depression, anxiety, and chronic pain. And generally, they tend to be happier, more hopeful, and have more energy and interest. Additionally, when employees thrive, so do our organizations. Some of the outcomes of thriving employees on our organizations include great things like greater productivity, greater profitability, lower turnover, higher customer service satisfaction, and even fewer safety incidents.
Those are awesome points, Dolly. Thank you. So here's a couple of questions that I'd like to put out to the group, and then we should discuss in breakout rooms. What threatens resilience and mental health in your workplace? And have these changed in light of COVID-19 or working from home? So Mike, I'm going to turn over to you to get us into rooms. Perfect. I think, you know what, I love these breakout rooms because I think it absolutely, everyone is in, you know, I think someone said it together, we're all in this together earlier on. It's interesting, a lot of kind of what kind of came out of the discussions were exactly what I kind of thought of. And the one point about, you know, just your own concern for your own health or the health of your loved ones is true. And that absolutely more than likely has changed in light of COVID-19 or working from home than what it was previously. On to the next one. So this quote that's on the next slide is from our annual Canadian National Benchmarking Survey, which we, Gallagher, conducts across Canada every April. And we send out numerous questions with regards to your workplace and your benefit offerings. So in 2020, we had over 600 organizations ranging across all industries, a large not-for-profit segment, and then organizations of all sizes. So if you're interested in the results or participating next year, please reach out to us after the session, and we'd certainly kind of be glad to get you in there. Let's move on a little bit and talk a little bit about stress in the workplace. We know stress is at epidemic proportions, and it impacts every generation in our workplace and negatively affecting resiliency. And this was even before COVID-19. Keep calm and carry on. I think we've all said this small statement from time to time, but think about it. Truly think about it. How powerful is it? Do you practice this in your workplace? Let's take a moment and I want you guys to really think about it. You know, however, despite how humorous or a slant to this kind of call to whatever we're going to call on, we can say that stress is the health epidemic of the 21st century. And employers and policymakers are increasingly taking the stress, anxiety, and depression affecting valuable members of the workforce much more seriously. The next few slides are going to show where we're at related to mental health across Canada before COVID-19. And as you'll see, mental health affects millions of Canadians. That's not a surprise. The Canadian Mental Health Association is concerned of yet another threat, the echo pandemic related to COVID-19, and how it may affect frontline workers, healthcare workers, vulnerable populations, and any other Canadian traumatized by the pandemic itself. Now, it's important to understand that prior to COVID-19, we were already dealing with near epidemic levels of stress, anxiety, loneliness, and depression. Almost 20% of us pre-pandemic would have experienced some type of mental health and or behavioral health issue this year. The costs to us personally and to businesses are staggering as we think about the impact on productivity, absenteeism, presenteeism, healthcare costs, which incidentally can be 2 to 3 times higher for those with a mental health or behavioral issue. And even employee engagement can be negatively affected if the employee perceives the work environment as what's causing them major stress. Again, pre-pandemic, 70% of Canadian employees are concerned about the psychological health and safety of the workplace. And it's astonishing and alarming to me to hear that 14% don't think that theirs is healthy or safe at all. Such workplaces can take a personal toll as well as contribute to staggering economic costs. How has this number changed, and how will the transition back to work alleviate or perhaps, in most cases, intensify these percentages? As we think about our landscape today, we know that managing through sickness and ill health at work can be challenging at any time. but it's especially so during an infectious disease outbreak. Employees may be anxious to what we actually even heard the past few slides and fearful about contracting the virus at work, bringing it home to their families, losing pay for time off, and not being able to pay the bills. At this time, the COVID-19 outbreak, the fear associated with the unknown, compounding the already high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression we're seeing in society, may be an equal or more significant threat than the physical manifestation of the virus itself. What we've seen up to this point is that the acute organizational need has really been around compliance and HR policy. However, as the pandemic evolves and continues over time, we need to make sure the employee perspective and promoting emotional well-being are at the forefront of the employer response. It's about building resiliency. Now, although it's a cliche I love this illustration. What we see is just the tip of the iceberg. Employees' resilience has taken a huge hit. The increased loneliness, burnout, reduced engagement are all going to be key factors in our path towards recovery. And these will be some key underlying themes sprinkled kind of today throughout today's message. So I just kind of want you to take some time just to kind of look a little bit of that slide and kind of see what's underneath the iceberg.
So let's dive a little deeper into some of the statistics we're talking about. So some facts on mental health in Canada. As Dean had mentioned, in Canada, 1 in 5 of us will experience some problem with our mental health in the course of a year. And according to the Government of Canada, some mental health problems are actually more common than many physical health problems that we're experiencing. And the Canadian Mental Health Association says that mental illness indirectly affects all Canadians at some time through a family member, through a friend, or a colleague. Quite staggering. And getting back to the benchmark survey that Gallagher runs, 37% of employers have enhanced their emotional well-being benefits during COVID-19. And in addition to adding well-being benefits, employers have also provided employees with listening channels, established centralized information hubs, provided consistent and empathetic messaging, and are offering appropriate flexibility. So employers are trying to do lots and will continue to do more. So let's look at the monetary costs. The cost to the Canadian economy is estimated at over $50 billion annually, and a shocking $20 billion of that alone stems from workplace losses. When we break that down even further, mental health issues cost businesses almost $1,500 per employee per year, which can add up pretty quickly in a larger organization. And 2/3 of employees who took time off for a mental health issue did not actually report why they were taking time off to their employer. What this means is that organizations have not yet developed a consistent culture of acceptance around workplace mental health, but there is certainly a growing need to do so. Stress is a normal part of life and work, and as we know, it can be positive or negative. Excessive negative stress through life events, including workplace stress, can contribute to mental health problems. One key to effective stress management is maintaining awareness of the potential stressors and readiness to address them before they become problematic. The health of our employees does not have to be compromised by stress. Changes to the organization of work can make a more mentally healthy workplace just by creating awareness alone and speaking openly to it. If you take a closer look at the slide, it does show some tools and considerations for creating resiliency at work. The new normal. Seems like an eternity ago when the mandatory restrictions started in Alberta in the spring. And here we are again in the second wave and again experiencing many new restrictions related to both our personal and our professional lives. And as we've seen, while these measures can be effective at controlling and slowing down the spread of the virus, they have completely changed the way we work and have so many intangible implications. Again, if we look at our 2020 benchmarking survey, in response to the pandemic, 72% of employers adopted work-at-home policies, and 43% implemented flexible scheduling back in June of 2020. 85% of employers are saying they plan to keep work-at-home policies, and 74% are saying they plan to keep flexible scheduling arrangements even after the pandemic is resolved. For so many of us, our workplace and our old work days provided us with so many of our social interactions, and work from home restrictions and changes have removed a lot of this. These important social connections and interpersonal support are powerful predictors of human resiliency, which is really our ability to bounce back from adversity. So, for employers and leaders, this means we need to create and foster ways for our employees to maintain these critical connections in their lives. If ever there was a time for us to be promoting resilience and well-being, it is now. So, resiliency has been around in research for years, but it certainly is a new COVID buzzword, just like pivot, which I'm so tired of hearing, personal protective equipment, or work from home. But really, what is resiliency? If anyone wants to put in the chat room what resiliency is to them, then please go right ahead. As we define it, resiliency is the ability to withstand, recover, and grow in the face of stressors and changing demands. Think of it as being like a tree. I love this analogy. Used it before and I'll continue to do so. Resiliency gives you the ability to have your roots firmly in the ground, but being able to bend and move in the face of the storm. You might lose a few leaves along the way, but you will not break. What else do we know about resiliency? Well, low levels of resiliency can increase the potential for burnout and loneliness and increase the likelihood of getting sick. Certainly, the last thing any of us need right now is to get sick. We know that when individuals experience burnout, their engagement and their excitement about the job will decrease over time. On the upside, we know we all have resiliency, but it may just be in different amounts. And Dean will elaborate on this in a little bit. Some of us, purely by genetics, are more resilient, but all of us can enhance our resiliency, especially as we think about COVID-19. Resiliency will help promote employee well-being, but it also positively affects an employee's commitment to your organization. Developing the capacity to adapt and evolve is really an important piece when it comes to fostering and maintaining resiliency. So to look at again, resilient employees make our organizations resilient too. And going back to our definition, by withstand, we mean being able to deal directly with a challenge. By recover, we mean being able to bounce back, including to levels better than the pre-stressor levels. And by grow, we mean really thriving in the face of adversity. In order to achieve sustainable success, you can't become a resilient, healthy organization by launching just another program. It must become how you operate in everything your organization does. Now, if there's one thing you need to take away from today's presentation, it is this resiliency matrix. It may be worthwhile printing or posting in your work area or even saving it onto your desktop so it's top of mind. So keys to that are coping, grit, emotional intelligence, and sense making, all key components of resiliency. And we think about coping. I heard something interesting on another webinar recently. So a lot of us talk about bouncing back and stuff like that, but the analogy they were using was actually bounce forward. So sometimes the challenge can actually push us forward and further ahead than we were than just our initial starting point. So something to think about. Surviving, let alone thriving through these times, will take every member of your team playing their part. With the ongoing pandemic, no end seems in sight currently for the new ways of working. And this means employers are especially challenged to help employees navigate the jarring effects of the unprecedented crisis. So another thing we like to think about is looking at your own energy as a battery, and what charges your battery and what drains your battery. So this is another useful exercise. You can either do with your staff, just like as a one-off here and there, or certainly as a more regular check-in at meetings or one-on-one discussions. So we'll spend the next few minutes talking about this in our small groups. So if you can discuss amongst yourselves, please, what are some of the things you're using to charge your battery? And what are some of the drains you're experiencing on your battery right now? I'd love to hear from some volunteers from each group to let us know what some of the key charges or drains were that you discussed in your groups. If you just don't mind going ahead and unmuting yourself, we'd appreciate that.
Don't make me voluntold you. I'm looking at you. You know who I'm looking at. Melissa Hozak, Mike O'Neill.
I'll jump in, I'm fine. Well, a few of us mentioned charging batteries with our pets, our loved ones, making sure. I mentioned that we like having a hot tub. That was one of the best advice things we got early on in the COVID side of things, mostly because our kids will sit and connect with us without phones. So they will sit, we call it hot tub party. We all, hop in there, teenagers and everyone, and they actually sit and chat with us, which is pretty cool. Because the draining side of it, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of meetings, a lot of virtual stuff. And then a few of us, I think Mike too, basically said fitness and sports for not only the physical side, but the mental side of it as well. So, and then I will show it. I'm getting a puppy this weekend, so here she is.
Oh, right on.
Oh.
That's awesome.
Puppy love. She's just adorable. She's my own puppy's
awesome.
actually half sister as well, so it's very exciting.
Oh.
That's a huge charger.
Yeah, and drainer.
Yes, both.
Yeah, that's true.
Both ways. But we're not traveling for sports like we normally do right now, so we figure it's a good time to get her trained and get her part of the family. So it's exciting.
Nice.
There you
Good.
go.
Thanks, Melissa. Dana from our group, do you mind sharing, please?
Yeah, we had some similar comments in terms of having a special place in the house to recharge your batteries, having some kind of physical exercise, connecting with your kids in different ways or grandkids. It was easier for us to list a few of the things that drained our batteries. Some of that was trying to keep up to all of the different support grants and the terminology and work that goes with that. And it was also the changing guidelines and restrictions that seem to be never ending. And so I think across the board for us, that was a big one. And then the other one was trying to maintain the support and energy and fill the batteries of those who we are responsible for in our work or we co-work with. So, that was keeping ourselves charged while trying to help charge other people. So that's kind of a summary from our group.
Great, thank you. And was there another group?
Karen, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Our group talked about kind of having alone time kind of seemed to be a common theme, having some time by yourself, a lot of drain from just the incessant talk about the pandemic. So having that time by yourself in different ways. We talked about reading and puzzles and crocheting and things like that, but having that time by yourself where you kind of shut out some of what's going on can be a really good way to recharge your battery. And I guess if you want to think really literally about charging a device, for example, you kind of plug it in and set it to the side and leave it alone. And I guess we're really not that different.
Yeah, good point. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. We really appreciate it. I think that those are great points. And I even made the comment in our group that as many times as we've done this presentation, it's very interesting to me that a lot of the people that are extroverts or come forward and say that they're extroverts, they all say, to what Aaron's point was, is that we actually do want just some alone time. We do want to be able to kind of recharge. We do want to just be able to kind of, plug in our brain again. And so don't ever think that you can't, just because you're an extrovert, that you can't just kind of sit there and have your alone time.
No, that's
so
excellent.
on to, go, sorry, Dolly.
No, that's great. Thank you everyone for sharing. We appreciate that. Oops, I can advance the slide.
So on basically talking a little bit about an individual's resiliency, it'll greatly determine their ability to overcome or resist feelings of burnout in the workplace. People who are resilient learn how to face their fears. The ability to face dramatically broadens the range of possibilities and choices available to any individual. But while failure, really, you're looking at to face fear, and it's basically highly constricting. One of the most common fears that must be faced and challenged by leaders and organizations is, and I'm going to say this, the fear of change itself. Leaders can also create a psychological zone of safety where mutual respect is the norm. So on to the next slide. This is kind of taken from the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health. And I like this slide because it kind of shows resilience can take you from surviving to thriving. And it certainly includes the items that are listed on the slide, but from surviving, being stressed, to thriving, thinking, oh, I'm recognizing my automatic responses to stress, or isolation, or one-sided relationships. And then to thriving, it's balancing your support network, or those you help and those who provide help to you. Waiting until a crisis to find help, or ensuring that you're aware of potential resources that are available to you. But how do you develop resilience? So how do we arm ourselves with tools to better deal with and bounce back from the difficult times in life? These details can be the difference between handling pressure at your job or at home and losing your cool. Resilient people tend to have more positive outlooks and cope with stress much more effectively. So some of these categories that are kind of shown on the slide can promote to your employees to help build their emotional resilience. So stuff like mindfulness, there are free apps that are available for that. Physical activity, so just get them to move. See how many days in a row you can get 10,000 steps in. It's very tricky in times like this. Community involvement and volunteering, maybe support a local business if you can. And also kind of, looking at financial well-being, challenge employees to create a budget with their partners or look through all their subscriptions to see if they're not using any. I just recently did that and I was amazed at how many that I was not using and had the opportunity to not subscribe anymore to. Now, I'm fortunate, on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the ACE survey. I'm fortunate to be brain certified in resiliency and adverse childhood experiences. So adding to the resiliency factor is this thing called adverse childhood experiences, which we kind of mentioned earlier on in the presentation. So adverse childhood experience is one of the largest investigations ever conducted to kind of assess associations between childhood maltreatment and later in life health and well-being. So the original survey and its associated ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, were really a collaboration between Childhood Development Centers and Kaiser Permanente's Healing Strategy in San Diego. And it was tied to Harvard University and the Center of Developing Child. So adverse childhood experiences are when young children experience chronic exposure to adverse events. The end result or effect is toxic. So research in the ongoing adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for short, the study showed that these adverse childhood experiences and the resulting toxic stress undermine a child's mental, physical, and behavioral health, and consequently show up and persist throughout adulthood. So therefore, and that's why people present the way they do sometimes at work. The more adverse childhood experiences one has had, the less resilient they are. But that's not to say resiliency can't be learned. But for the purposes of the ACE survey, it's important to kind of understand what those adverse childhood experiences included. Abuse, alcoholism in family systems, child abuse, domestic violence, dysfunctional families, effects of domestic violence on children, neglect, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychological abuse, and verbal abuse. So I anticipate that every person on this webinar feels that they've experienced some type of adverse childhood experiences to some degree. And I'm here to tell you that, believe it or not, we've all had them, some more severe than others. So we all score to somewhat of a degree on the research that was done. I want to take a little break and watch a video from the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative about brains and the journey to resilience. So I'm going to get Mike to play that video for us.
I don't have that video, Dean.
Oh,
Okay.
then I'm going to see.
I will give
Dolly's
it a go.
going to.
Dolly's okay, Dolly. So when you click share screen, so fire your video up, take up your
Okay.
whole screen, click on share screen, and then there'll be two buttons on the bottom. One will turn sound on for everybody, and the other one will optimize it, the sharing experience for Zoom.
Okay, where do I find the share screen again?
It's the big
Oh,
green
I'm here.
button at the bottom of your screen.
Oh, sorry, I got to get, okay, I see. So then, okay, video, and then share sound. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, perfect directions, thank you. Hopefully this works.
Brains. They are everywhere. In the world's gentlest places and its harshest. In this unforgiving environment, some brains exhibit troubling signs. Addiction, illness, depression, social disorder. Yet others thrive. Why have some brains developed the ability to cope in harsh conditions while others struggle? It is one of nature's great secrets.
Hi. Hello? This is amazing. But I just need to clarify a few things. This great secret? It's actually science. Severe adversity isn't good for any brain. But it is true that some brains do better than others in the face of significant challenges.
Oh, a scientist. Yes, I agree. This is a great secret of science.
Great, yes, but not a secret. Let me explain. We're born with brains, but our brains change as we grow. They develop based on experiences we have, and different brains respond to experiences in different ways. Okay, thanks. I'll let you get back to it.
Indeed. Some brains show robustity and strongitude, while others...
Sorry, we scientists use the word resilience. Some brains are more resilient than others.
Yes, resiliensis.
Resilience?
Resilience. Revenge of the cortex.
Resilience is a result of the interplay between genes and life experiences. It's a brain's ability to maintain good functioning under adversity.
Resilience makes us invincible.
Nothing makes us invincible. What resilience does is to give less leverage to negative factors in our lives and tip the balance in favor of positive outcomes.
Resilience. Fate's legendary prize.
Whoa, no! Some people are born with more resilience than others, but resilience can also be built over time. It's a big project involving parents, caregivers, teachers,
Kith, kin, karaoke comrades,
soccer coaches, counselors,
pastry chefs, associate producers, even millennials. Like a barn raising in times of old.
Yeah. In fact, we scientists believe strong brain architecture is the foundation for resilience. And, oh, look over there.
Oh, yes. A young brain returns after months of isolation and adversity. No words can describe what this poor brain has suffered.
There are words that describe it. We scientists call it toxic stress.
Toxic stress lies in wait.
No. Stress happens inside the body. It's the fight or flight system kicking in. But if stress hormones are elevated too high and for too long, it can have negative effects on the brain and body.
Stress, a nasty poison.
Not all stress, just toxic stress. With the right supports, we can make severe stress tolerable, which means it won't do lasting damage. Stress can even be positive because it helps us to learn problem solving and coping skills, which leads us back to resilience.
Alas, this brain is resilience-less.
No, it isn't. Let me explain. Remember when I talked about giving less leverage to negative experiences and tipping the scale in a positive direction? Well, here's a little something I've been working on. It's a really amazing metaphor. Here it goes. I call it the resilience scale.
Resilience scales. Protective armor plates that's
Shiny. But no, The resilience scale helps us understand why some brains are more resilient than others.
The resilience scale sends out invisible resilience rays
It's really just a scale. See? It's a beam being held up by a fulcrum.
full of crumbs.
Geez, no! A fulcrum. You know, like high school Never mind. Let me just clean this up. See, negative experiences add weight to one end of the beam, and positive factors add weight to the other end. Ideally, we want the scale to tip toward the positive side and lead towards positive life outcomes.
The brain's future literally hangs in the balance.
The position of the fulcrum can be understood as our original capacity for resilience. It's something like our genetic starting position. Remember the young brain that was struggling to survive? Look, it started life with the fulcrum off-center, giving more leverage to negative experiences. Serious stuff, like abuse, neglect, and chaotic environments. That means positive factors like responsive relationships, safe environments, and learning opportunities had less leverage. Over time, the negative load shifted the fulcrum even farther in a negative direction.
Tragedy. Doom.
Not at all. Right now, this brain is experiencing poor health. But with help, the scale can be tipped toward more positive outcomes. The first thing we can do is to stop negative experiences from stacking up. Then we can add more positive factors, loading up the positive side of the scale. And we're not done. We can work to shift the fulcrum in a way that favors positive outcomes.
The fulcrum, an amazing instant fix-it button.
No, it's a process. It involves many supportive people and plenty of time. Remember? This brain is still young, so adult brains can work with it to relieve toxic stress and teach coping skills. In early childhood, these efforts can push the fulcrum a considerable distance.
Childhood, filled with fascination and fulcrum flexibility.
Sort of, but there are other sensitive developmental periods that are windows of opportunity, like adolescence. And even if this brain doesn't get help until adulthood, change is still possible. It will take more support, and the change will be less dramatic. But any fulcrum can be moved to make positive outcomes more achievable.
The bad experiences disappear.
I'm afraid not. It's hard to undo the effects of past negative experiences, and it takes time. But we can eventually relieve the burden of those negative experiences. Our little brain can get the help it needs to adapt, recover, and enjoy good health and wellness.
And everyone, everywhere can become more resilient for eternity.
Why not? With the right support, everyone everywhere can become more resilient.
I'm so glad I saved humanity. It's been a majestic experience.
Yeah, me too. Well done.
Okay, so share.
Awesome. Thanks, Dolly, for looking after that.
Glad it worked.
I love that video. So we're going to move we're going to skip a couple of slides because the couple just after this really kind of went through that video, and we're certainly available afterwards and even reach out even after today's presentation. We can discuss it more. But let's move on to slide 31. And when we look at creating supportive and resilience-friendly environment, it sounds almost kind of really foolish for me to have to state this given our kind of current environment, but each person on a team is equal. They may not play the same role or contribute to the overall success of a team in the same way, but the moment team members start being that they're treated differently is the moment your trust begins to erode. And back to our contributor of toxic stress in the workplace. So burnout affects engagement. So when individuals experience more burnout, their engagement and excitement about the job decreases over time. So we know that successful leaders know that in order to guide and motivate an effective team, they need to assess and understand the strengths and weaknesses of each team member. They often live by a set of values, moral principles that foster integrity, strength during times of adversity. So whether a leader perseveres or gives up may depend on multiple influences, including genetic or epigenetic factors, and work together to impact one's ability to manage stress. But there is light at the end of the tunnel.
So as we talked about, individuals with lower levels of engagement in general have higher health costs, absenteeism, safety accidents, have lower control over their finances, and this lack of engagement can be contagious. So our communication needs to be authentic, transparent, and timely. It's not enough for us to say the right things, we have to do the right things. Leaders need to follow the guidance that they are distributing and understand that through their words and actions, they have a significant opportunity to positively influence employee response and reduce stress. If the guidance is to work remotely, but leaders still come into the office, you've missed the opportunity to model positive behavior, potentially eroded trust, and added confusion and stress as employees may wonder if they're really expected to show up, even though the guidance says stay at home. Leaders who share their own challenges, maybe working remotely for the first time, technology issues they face, challenges with childcare or aging parents, and such will go a long way towards humanizing the crisis, letting employees know that we are all in this together. I hate to use the word contagious in the face of a pandemic, but the leader responses, either positive or negative during this crisis, will be contagious to employees and their workplaces. So here are some things you can do. Promote your employee assistance program. Encourage physical activity. Create connectedness. Be flexible and generous when possible, and understand that employee engagement drivers may shift.
So resiliency is a combined effort of all of these together that Dolly just chatted about. It's no longer about just physical health, wellness, or well-being programs of the past that primarily focused on physical health, but in my opinion, truly missed the mark. They focused on nutrition, exercise, and condition management, but we've learned that these silos alone failed to address and recognize other factors that contribute to an individual's resiliency, like relationships, mental health, financial concern, recognition, appreciation, just to name a few. Think about it. The whole person comes to work every day, and to get a little crazy on you, each employee's well-being influences individual and organizational performance.
Finally, and most importantly, as we were talking about during the battery exercise, take care of your own well-being. Building resilience or grit is a critical balance of demands of work with the demands on your mind and your body. Consider ways to build your own resilience if you aren't already doing so. Learn how to manage and practice managing your own stress. Engage in exercise, like was mentioned. I heard meditation and mindfulness, reading, pets, whatever helps you relax so you can be refreshed for those whom you have to lead. We encourage you to review and apply what you've discussed today to enable you to continue to be successful as a leader, and especially so during times of crisis. You might not get them all of the right, might not get all of them right all of the time, and that's being realistic. Let your team know what you are doing and engage with them as often as possible. Role model the behaviors for them, and they will believe you that these rough times too will end. And as we like to say here at Gallagher, remember, put on your oxygen mask first before assisting others. You simply cannot help the workforce if you yourself are struggling. We cannot develop programs or processes to reduce the negative impacts of stress and promote individual and organizational resiliency if we cannot help our own selves in the first place.
Now, we'd love to hear your opinion on your definition of success this moment right now. So please feel free to email us, and our email addresses will be shown on the final slide with your responses once you've had some time to reflect on all you've heard today. Or if you'd rather have a discussion with us on how to have these conversations, we're gladly open to that too. Keep in mind, you might shift some priorities over time, and that is absolutely fine. What matters is that your definition of success is meaningful to your organization and it's measurable. You should also establish who will be in charge of monitoring the success of the program and how often results should be analyzed. So when employees feel that they can be their authentic selves truly, with all the uniqueness and individuality that that might entail, they're more likely to do their best work and to want to stay with your organization. Remember, folks, your job is to work with and assist your employees to thrive, and I mean really thrive, not just at work, but also at home and in their communities. Top to bottom, bottom to top, tomorrow, today, right now at this moment. So let's conclude our session today with one final thought. As much as we'd like to return to the way things were, we simply won't. So let's use this opportunity to create the mentally resilient workplace cultures that should have existed all along. Thanks so much for your time.